No sooner have we had the arrival of the BYD Seal U in DMI or plug-in hybrid form, we now have this, the BYD Sealion 7. It's a sportier, more coupe styling based on a similar platform, but this comes only with electric powertrains. We've a lot to go through in this video, from the different powertrain options, the interior, and of course what it's like to drive. So stay tuned and let's get into it. Design-wise, this has a familiar face to the Seal U and also the Seal sedan. So you see this in the headlights with this C shape that comes round and the double headlight design, but it has a slightly more aggressive styling on the front with this almost X shape on the front of the design. And that's what really sets it apart from the Seal U DMI. So it does look a little bit different, but also it still has that familiar family look that we've seen on the current BYD models. Then when we come around the side is where you start to see some of the differences that are on this. This particular car is wearing the larger 20-inch wheels. Standard cars will come on 19-inch wheels. Either way, you're getting decent sized tires on it, and you kind of have this squared off wheel arch design as well, which again plays into a bit more of a modern style. And you've got a small BYD design badge on the side. The door mirrors also include the NFC technology, so you can just tap your phone against it to unlock it. And some of the differences, again, you'll see this now has flush fitting door handles that pop out from the doors when the door is unlocked and then retract in. That helps not only improve aerodynamics, but it kind of gives it a bit of a sleeker look. And that sleek look is what you'll also see from the roofline here. So you get a black high gloss finish around the DLO, around the window frames, same on the doors here. And then this spoiler extends across the back, but actually the air flows in underneath this spoiler across the back window. You will notice there's no rear wiper on this. Again, this is an aerodynamic thing where manufacturers say that the air coming across the back of the window will keep it clear of water. We're not so sure about that. It's dry today, but time will tell what that's like. And there's also a smaller spoiler across the back of the boot lid. So as the air comes down here, it also hits that and adds a little bit aerodynamics stability. You will see overall it does have a sportier roofline overall, and you also see this rear haunches here, which are a bit more pronounced than what we see on other BYD models. Then around the back of the car, I guess it's a pretty attractive looking rear end. You've got this nice kind of detail in the tail lights, and of course, as is the trend these days, you've got a full length light bar across the back of it as well. BYD badging, pretty big and proud there. And also on the back, you'll see it says BYD Sealion 7. The 4.5S is not a 4.5 litre engine for those that might wonder, but it's the amount of time it takes for this car to accelerate from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour, just 4.5 seconds. Other details then, again, you've got low set registration plate in the back and a plastic rear diffuser here, which gives it a little bit of a sportier look. Maybe it would be a little bit nicer if it was in a gloss black finish like the rest of the car, but nevertheless, it still gives it a pretty decent look all around. When it comes to boot space, first of all, you get an electrically operated tailgate, which is nice and handy. You get 520 litres as standard. And if you drop down the 60-40 split folding rear seats, that cargo volume increases to 1,789 litres, which is a pretty generous amount. And you get another 58 litres of boot space in the frunk. Great if you want to throw in a small bag, overnight bag, or even your charging cables. The interior is very familiar if you've been in any of the other BYD models, and it's nicely laid out. It's fairly simple, and overall, the quality of the materials are pretty decent. So let's start off with what's in front of you. First of all, you've got that kind of signature large rotating touchscreen here. It's a 15.6-inch display. Looks very good. You can have it in either orientation, and it's also available apart from the usual built-in BYD system, which now the navigation includes Google points of interest. You can also have wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto as well. Speaking of all things wireless, you've also got a 50-watt wireless phone charger, and it's really good to use because as soon as you put your phone there, it automatically starts charging very quickly. So that's a really nice thing. And it's got a nice kind of suede finish as well. And it's designed in a way that your phone's not really going to move around and therefore move off the area that's charging it. So that's pretty decent. The rest of the center console here, it's quite simple design really. It's mostly flat. You've got a couple of buttons here for changing the driving modes and also your stop start, and a little rotary dial here, little scroller for your volume, and a small crystal-like drive selector for going between forward and reverse gears. You've got two decent sized cup holders, bottle holders there, and there's more storage underneath here. Actually a fairly decent storage bin in there as well, so that's pretty good. Nice sort of size, decent enough of a width as well, so both you and your passenger can use the armrest. You've got a couple of vents set low down there, that's nice, and you see there's a little bit of a gap here. You've got some ambient lighting available. You can choose a whole abundance of different colors. You have a nice bit of pattern here on this area too. And then in front of the driver, you've got a 10.25-inch digital display. You can also get a head-up display as well. That's available on this Range Topping Excellence model. And then a fairly nice steering wheel. It's flat-bottomed. It's kind of got this 4-spar design and a metallic finish on some of the buttons as well. It's nice that these are physical buttons too. You can easily set your cruise control on the left, or all your media, your phone calls, etc. on the right as well. It's got a nice sort of decent feel to it. It's a nice size. It's not too thick rimmed as well, which is good. And then other features you'll see, well, you've kind of got this nice design that comes around here. The door handle, you just lift this up here to release it as well. All your physical buttons here on the side for your windows and also your mirrors. And the door bins are actually a decent enough size. They're not the deepest, but they're not too bad. However, if you do need more storage, you've also got more space underneath there as well. So it's nice that you can put some extra things in there, maybe a small bag or anything, any odds and ends you might have are available in there. You've also see there's a couple of USB-C ports down there too if you don't want to use the wireless charger, and the front seats are electrically adjustable in this Excellence version. They're quite nicely designed as well. They're fairly sculpted, nice finish to them as well, and yeah, pretty comfortable. That's what it's like in the front seats. Let's have a look and see what it's like for passengers in the rear. There is a pretty generous amount of room, given that this has a slightly sloping roofline. There's actually a lot of space in here, but they've done a couple of clever things. These seat backs are nice and reclined. Now you can actually adjust them if you want. So if you do want to have them a little bit more upright, you can do. There's a couple of different settings to that. But when it's reclined all the way, well, not only is it a little bit more relaxing, but it gives you an extra little bit of headroom when that's quite crucial. But also adding to that sense of space back here is this really big glass panoramic roof. Now it does have a blind, so you know, in the colder months or if it's particularly sunny outside, you can close that over. But when it's open on a bit of an overcast day, it just floods this cabin with light and it makes it feel a lot more spacious in here than you might think. Now, I mentioned how much room I have. This driver's seat is set up from my driving position, and I'm a fairly average height. I'm about 5'8", but I've got loads of knee room here, which is great, and I can even get my feet in underneath the seat in front because it's up high enough. So if I do want to stretch out, it's actually quite relaxing. And even the seat base here does extend quite a bit further, so I have a little bit of extra support under my legs. Now, perhaps this is a little bit high for smaller children that are going to be sitting in here, but overall the view out isn't too bad. You've got a similar door handle, door release design as what we have in the front. You've got okay door bins, again, enough for a small-ish drinks bottle is going to be fine to fit in there. There's pockets on the backs of the seats as well, a large main one and then two smaller ones. You've also got ventilation back here. The outer seats on this particular model are heated, and you've got two USB-C charge ports back here as well, so people will be able to keep their devices topped up. Now, the middle seat is always, sometimes it gets the hard deal, the raw deal in these such cars, but it's actually not too bad. It's wide enough and it's not overly firm, but it's not as comfortable as the outer two rear seats, which incidentally are also equipped with ISOFIX points. Now, if you're not going to use this middle seat, you can pop down this center armrest. You've got a pair of cup holders in here as usual, and there's even a shallow little storage compartment in here as well. Might be handy to leave a couple of charging cables in there to keep the youngsters happy and make sure they're always able to top up their devices with that USB plug. But overall, it's actually pretty spacious. You get grab handles back here, and there's even coat hooks on the B pillar in here as well on both sides. So overall, this is a pretty well equipped and a car that looks after its rear passengers pretty well. There are 3 different versions available for the Sealion 7 called Comfort, Design All-Wheel Drive and Excellence All-Wheel Drive. Comfort has an 82.5 kilowatt-hour battery and a front-wheel drive electric motor with 312 horsepower and 380 newton meters. It will accelerate from 0 to 100 in 6.7 seconds and has a top speed of 215 kilometers per hour. The crucial thing is that it's got 482 kilometers of range and has DC charging of 150 kilowatts, meaning it can go from 10 to 80% in 32 minutes. The mid-range design all-wheel drive has the same size battery, but the extra motor means it has 530 horsepower, 690 newton meters, and accelerates in 4.5 seconds. It's got the same 215 kilometer an hour top speed and slightly less range at 456 kilometers. It also matches the Comfort in terms of charging time. The range topping model is the Excellence all-wheel drive. Now, this is the only one that gets a larger 91.3 kilowatt hour battery. It has the same 530 horsepower output and 690. In fact, it's also at the same acceleration and top speed as the design all-wheel drive, but that larger battery means it's got 502 kilometers of range in WLTP, and it has a faster charging rate, 230 kilowatt DC, meaning it can go from 10 to 80% in just 24 minutes. So we're going to go for a drive in the BYD Sealion, and the first thing I noticed is this sound. Now, I don't know how well you can hear that. It sounds like you've left the door open, like an alarm, but it's the indicator. Now, I think that's something that some people might find a little bit annoying. Anyway, first things first, let's get this out of the way. Performance. This thing is plenty quick. Literally nobody needs this much performance in an electric, certainly a family orientated electric SUV. But needless to say, this does have a lot of power. Do you really need to accelerate from 0 to 100 in 4.5 seconds? I don't think so. Are you actually going to do it all that often? To be honest, I don't think so. And although we don't have pricing for this all-wheel drive Excellence model, it's pushing 60,000 euros in the German market. In Ireland, we know how car prices in Ireland can be for new cars. This could be a very expensive option. To be honest, I probably think most people will simply forego the slightly larger 91 kilowatt hour battery for the smaller mid-range model, because it gets a slightly smaller battery. It's still very, very good in terms of range. It's going to be a little bit cheaper and you don't lose out any performance. So that could be the sweet spot if you want the performance model. You don't necessarily want the outright thing. The big thing is obviously that that mid-range model doesn't get the 230 kilowatt DC charging, but maybe you can live with that if you're going to be always charging at home or mostly charging at home. I think the standard 150 kilowatt you get is going to be sufficient. Now, you can of course go through several different driving modes if you do want to do that. You've got the usual eco, normal, sport, even a thing called Snowland with this all-wheel drive model. Sport obviously gives you all of that performance, but again, are you really going to use it? Probably not. Leaving it in normal is certainly more than adequate. You can also change a couple of other things, such as the amount of brake assist you have between Comfort and Sport, and also the steering, again, between Comfort and Sport. In terms of what this car is like to drive on a day-to-day basis, well, there are a couple of good points and one point I'm not so sure about. First of all, the good points. It's very quiet inside. Of course, this is an electric vehicle, but BYD has gone to extra measures with acoustic layering, special glass to help reduce wind noise, all those kinds of things that help make these cars that little bit more refined, a little bit nicer to live with on a day-to-day basis. So yes, it is quite refined in that respect. The suspension utilizes FSD technology, which is frequency selective damping. And it's a kind of a semi-active system, and what that means is it will adjust the level of damping according to speed and the situation. Now, the only thing is, I've driven other cars with that and it can work quite well. In this car, I find that over certain bumps in the road and breaks in tarmac, it can really kind of thump over these things, and it's the one thing that really protrudes into what is otherwise quite a nice and refined driving experience. Now, this car is on the larger 20-inch wheels, but I don't think that's going to make a massive difference even if this was on the slightly smaller 19s. Now, it's not a deal breaker, but it's just an observation of how I found it driving on what is generally pretty good roads here in Germany. Now, it's not to really compare this with the Seal U because that's a plug-in hybrid and a very different proposition, but clearly BYD has wanted to make this car feel sportier, and yes, the suspension is on the firmer side compared to the Seal U. But one of the things we noted about the Seal U, which is the DMI, the plug-in hybrid, is that the suspension was almost too soft and it did roll a lot in the corners. Not so with this. This is definitely a sharper handling car, but even on the straight here, we're not doing any major driving inputs, you can just feel that kind of firmness in the suspension, and well, I think it slightly detracts from what could otherwise be quite a plush and comfortable ride. Now, obviously, when it comes to driving range, we don't really have the time today to put that WLTP figure to the test and see what this really does, but over a variety of different driving conditions today, including a little bit of motorway work here on the Autobahn, the car is still returning an indicator, showing an indicated consumption figure of 18.2 to 18.3 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Now, that's not bad. It's not a particularly warm day. It's only 9 degrees here, and at the moment we're driving around. It's okay, we're in a nice part of the world. It's in a park. We're only doing sort of 60-65 kilometers an hour, but still decent enough. It could be a little bit better, and I suspect if you spent longer, certainly driving in urban conditions, maybe at slightly lower speeds, or if you're in a city, you may see that figure improve even more. Obviously, if you're going to do a lot of motorway work, that figure will increase, but generally 18.3 is what the trip computer is showing us at the moment. Not too bad, not something I'd complain about, and after all, this does have a pretty sizable battery and a pretty good range, so range anxiety isn't necessarily a thing you're likely to experience with the Sealion 7, and even charging anxiety is not going to be a thing because this one will do the 230 kilowatt DC charging. But the one thing is the performance. That's the really thing that it's going to stand out for people, and yeah, it's definitely going to put your headrest to the test. Instant shove with that electric power, bundles of torque, and very stable at how it does that too, because it's got all-wheel drive, it's driving both axles. It is still, you know, no problem in terms of putting down that traction, putting down that power and accelerating. Even pulling out here from a junction and turning the wheel, very stable, very straightforward, and very quick. But of course, do that all the time and that efficiency figure is definitely going to decrease. Your consumption rates will go up. But that is just a novelty with this thing, and I think most people day to day aren't really going to do that. It's nice to have that performance if you're in a situation you need to do a very quick overtake, or maybe get out of a situation on a motorway or something that you're not entirely comfortable with. You can just very quickly make progress. But overall, equipment levels are very, very good regardless of which version of the Sealion 7 you choose. You don't really feel like you're getting hard done by, even if you just stick with the single motor version. So overall, yes, it is pretty good. We don't have pricing, and that's really going to be a key thing will persuade people whether they want to go for this or not. And certainly this range topping model is probably going to be a little bit too pricey for some people, but I think most people are still going to be very well served by just sticking with that single motor version with the slightly smaller battery. And I say slightly smaller battery, it's still very, very good for what you're going to get in terms of range, in terms of performance. So there's really no issue there. And that could be the one that really lands in that pricing sweet spot that will give people exactly what they want. Time will tell, and hopefully we'll have this car for a little bit longer when we get to Ireland, but as initial first test, yeah, it's not bad. So that's our first drive review of the BYD Sealion 7. If you want to know more about this car, and indeed any of its rivals, visit our website. It's CompleteCar.ie. You'll find a link to it in the description below, and it's a great resource for finding your next new car, as well as keeping up with all the latest car news. But we'd also love to know what you think about this car, and indeed about the BYD brand. So don't be shy, get involved in the comments below and tell us what you think. Thanks for watching.